So, we come back to the Life Divine, chapter 26, the Ascent towards Supermind. Before commencing, this is the 25th of March, 2018. It's an auspicious day for a number of reasons. This is Rama Navami Day, the day that Sri Rama was born, in the middle of the day, somewhere between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. And it also is the day that concludes the Vasanta Navaratri, the 9 nights of the Divine Mother, as worshipped in the Devi Bhagavata. And there's a long story, a couple of different stories that go into the telling of the meaning of this. We don't have time to go into the stories, but they both involve the conquest of darkness by the light and power of the Divine Mother. And she enables those who have the right approach to human governance to come into a position so that the best can be done and that the Sanatana Dharma can move forward. It is also an unusual occasion because the star under which Sri Rama was born is again in position today, on the Sunday, with this auspicious arrangement. I think it's been 200 years since it all came together like this. So, if I'm wrong in the details, I beg you to better inform me. I should also say that today is the 25th of March, 2018, the birthday of a dear friend of ours, Dr. R.L. Kashyap, who completes his 80th year. So, in the old tradition of things, now he can take up his life's work. To Sri Aurobindo. He's been describing the impact of the higher ranges of consciousness upon the integrality of our being as we climb out of the provinces of the mind into the higher mind and are stimulated by great illuminations at the level of thought. How we move from that into the illumined mind, where we no longer have to think, but we see in masses. And, of course, when we get to the intuitive level and live in the full light of this delegated power of the supermind and see with an edge of the ray of truth, then it's still higher and more veridical a kind of knowledge that we have, and a power that's placed upon all the members of the being, and each represents a tremendous advance. A tremendous advance. None of them, however, transformative. So, if we grow out of mind into higher mind, and then into illumined mind, and then into intuition, we still have not reached the summit of what is possible within the general region of the mind. And so, Sri Aurobindo begins. The next step of the ascent brings us to the overmind. The intuitional change can only be an introduction to this higher spiritual overture. But we have seen that the overmind, even when it is selective and not total in its action, is still a power of cosmic consciousness, a principle of global knowledge which carries in it a delegated light from the supramental gnosis. It is, therefore, only by an opening into the cosmic consciousness that the overmind ascent and descent can be made wholly possible. A high and intense individual opening upwards is not sufficient. To that vertical ascent towards summit light, there must be added a vast horizontal expansion of the consciousness into some totality of the spirit. At the least, the inner being must already have replaced by its deeper and wider awareness the surface mind and its limited outlook, and learned to live in a large universality. For otherwise, the overmind view of things and the overmind dynamism will have no room to move in and effectuate its dynamic operations. When the overmind descends, the predominance of the centralizing ego sense is entirely subordinated, lost in largeness of being, and finally abolished. A wide cosmic perception and feeling of a boundless universal self and movement replaces it. Many motions that were formerly egocentric may still continue, but they occur as currents or ripples in the cosmic wideness. Thought, for the most part, no longer seems to originate individually in the body or the person, but manifests from above or comes in upon the cosmic mind waves. All inner individual sight or intelligence of things is now a revelation or illumination of what is seen or comprehended, but the source of the revelation is not in one's separate self, but in the universal knowledge. The feelings, emotions, sensations are similarly felt as waves from the same cosmic immensity, breaking upon the subtle and the gross body, and responded to in kind by the individual center of the universality. For the body is only a small support, or even less, a point of relation for the action of a vast cosmic instrumentation. So we can see the giving up of the individual egoistic boundaries, this false division between person and universe, living more in cosmicity, less in egocentricity. And of course, this is the basis of his own experience. As the more he grew in the power of his yoga, the more this became a truth in him. But this idea that thought occurring or manifesting itself from above was really his experience from 1908 on, but it became absolute and regular. He did not have to think to ratiocinate from the logical mind. It would be as if delivered from above, from another range of consciousness. And this, I can't let this line go by. The feelings, emotions, sensations are similarly felt as waves from the same cosmic immensity, breaking upon the subtle and the gross body. It reminds me of that line from Savitri, sights, sound waves breaking from the soul's great deeps, which Sri Aurobindo drew special attention to as from, I'll leave it unsaid here, a very high plane of inspiration. In this boundless largeness, not only the separate ego, but all sense of individuality, even of a subordinated or instrumental individuality, may entirely disappear. The cosmic existence, the cosmic consciousness, the cosmic delight, the play of cosmic forces are alone left. So I pause there in the middle of the sentence. Existence, consciousness, delight, Sat Chit Ananda. So at the level of this overmind awareness, there is a play of Sat Chit Ananda through all the being. If the delight or the center of force is felt in what was the personal mind, life, or body, it is not with a sense of personality, but as a field of manifestation. And this sense of the delight or of the action of force is not confined to the person or the body, but can be felt at all points in an unlimited consciousness of unity which pervades everywhere. And of course, we've spoken about this with respect to Sri Aurobindo's experience on what we now call Siddhi Day, the 24th of November, how the totality of that overmind consciousness descended into him. But it is something that he had lived in inwardly for years. It was the fact that it seized the body and became even a bodily experience, that there was no division between the sense of the body self and all the rest of the world. They were commensurate. All occurred within the cosmic physicality, the cosmic prana, life force, the cosmic mind. All of it at once. So, universe in universe in universe, multiplied endlessly through the cosmos. This was his experience all the way down to the cells of his body. He writes, but there can be many formulations of overmind consciousness and experience. For the overmind has a great plasticity and is a field of multiple possibilities. In place of an uncentered and unplaced diffusion, there may be the sense of the universe in oneself or as oneself. But there too, this self is not the ego. It is an extension of a free and pure essential self-consciousness, or it is an identification with the all, the extension or the identification constituting a cosmic being, a universal individual. So one can experience the static self, the reality beyond time and space, or one can experience that same self in terms of its Atma Shakti, its demonstration of itself as a cosmic power, and then, this is your experience, a universal individual. That self has instantiated itself in this person. No ego is there. It is a point of universality, you see. In one state of the cosmic consciousness, there is an individual included in the cosmos, but identifying himself with all in it, with the things and beings, with the thought and sense, the joy and grief of others. So this is identifying the reality in all that one meets. This is the cosmic all. In another state, there is an inclusion of beings in oneself and a reality of their life as part of one's own being. So either of these positions is reciprocal. Both are a play of the transcendent, and he'll get to that in a moment. Often, there is no rule or governance of the immense movement, but a free play of universal nature to which what was the personal being responds with a passive acceptance or a dynamic identity, while yet the spirit remains free and undisturbed by any bondage to the reactions of this passivity or this universal and impersonal identification and sympathy. So one is unmoved whether one takes the passive poise, like the Purusha, and simply gazes at all the play, or whether one intimately embraces and expresses oneself within it. There is no loss of that immense peace and calm. The static is not lost in the movement. This, as you can see, Lord Shiva in his dance as Nataraj, despite the whirl of the cosmos and all the energies being expressed through him, his eyes are closed, intensely identified with the infinity and the delight that he is in essence. Often, there is no rule or governance of the immense movement, but a free play of universal nature to which what was the personal being responds with a passive acceptance or a dynamic identity, while yet the spirit remains free and undisturbed by any bondage to the reactions of this passivity or this universal and impersonal identification and sympathy. It's worth a second reading. But with a strong influence or full action of the overmind, a very integral sense of governance, a complete supporting or overruling presence and direction of the cosmic self or the Ishvara can come in and become normal. Or a special center may be revealed or created overtopping and dominating the physical instrument, individual in fact of existence, but impersonal in feeling, and recognized by a free cognition as something instrumental to the action of a transcendent and universal being. So the cosmic self would be that being expressed as the universal all. The Ishvara, of course, Purushottama, the Supreme Person, who manifests both Brahman as a static identity and the moving universe as a dynamic identity, dwelling in both simultaneously. One can be the person and be impersonal, and through you, if you became over-mentalized and lived this state of consciousness, then in submission to, in identification with that, there would stand in your person, at least at moments, the presence, the action, the power, the delight of the Supreme itself. Ego must be abolished. There can be no assignation of that as being one's own possession. In the transition towards the supermind, this centralizing action tends towards the discovery of a true individual replacing the dead ego, a being who is in his essence one with the Supreme Self, one with the universe and extension, and yet a cosmic center and circumference of the specialized action of the infinite. So, one is essentially that. You know that to be true. One is identified with the universe in the round, and you become a center of that universe, but also a circumference, because all the universe exists within your expanded being. So this is the enormity of the spiritual experience that one has, and its vastness, cosmic in extension. This is the true cosmic consciousness, which Richard Buckey tried to express in his famous book in the late 19th, early 20th century. This really tells you what is afoot And he goes on, these are the first, these are the general first results and create the normal foundation of the overmind consciousness in the evolved spiritual being. But its varieties and developments are innumerable. The consciousness that thus acts is experienced as a consciousness of light and truth, a power, force, action, full of light and truth, an aesthesis and sensation of beauty and delight, universal and multitudinous in detail, an illumination in the whole and in all things, in the one movement and all movements, with a constant extension and play of possibilities which is infinite, even in its multitude of determinations, endless and indeterminable. This is an echo, isn't it, of the very first verse of the Isha Upanishad. And the Isha is the foundation of foundations drawn from that Vedantic core knowledge for Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine. If the power of an ordering overmind gnosis intervenes, then there is a cosmic structure of the consciousness and action. But this is not like the rigid mental structures. It is plastic, organic, something that can grow and develop and stretch into the infinite. All spiritual experiences are taken up and become habitual and normal to the new nature. All essential experiences belonging to the mind, life, and body are taken up and spiritualized, transmuted, and felt as forms of the consciousness, delight, power of the infinite existence. Satchit Ananda again. Intuition, illumined sight and thought enlarge themselves. Their substance assumes a greater substantiality, mass, energy. Their movement is more comprehensive, global, many-faceted, more wide and potent in its truth force. The whole nature, knowledge, aesthesis, sympathy, feeling, dynamism become more Catholic, all understanding, all embracing, cosmic, infinite. So you see this ensphering effect that it has. The overmind change is the final consummating movement of the dynamic spiritual transformation. It is the highest possible status dynamis of the spirit in the spiritual mind plane. It takes up all that is in the 3 steps below it and raises their characteristic workings to their highest and largest power, adding to them a universal wideness of consciousness and force, a harmonious concert of knowledge, a more manifold delight of being. Now, the 3 steps below it, he's not talking of mind, life, and body here. He's talking about intuition, the illumined mind, and higher mind, and how the pouring of the potency of overmind into them has this effect. But there are certain reasons arising from its own characteristic status and power that prevent it from being the final possibility of this spiritual evolution. It is a power, though the highest power, of the lower hemisphere. Although its basis is a cosmic unity, its action is an action of division and interaction, an action taking its stand on the play of the multiplicity. Its play is like that of all mind, a play of possibilities. Although it acts not in the ignorance, but with the knowledge of the truth of these possibilities, yet it works them out through their own independent evolution of their powers. Remember, the supermind is fundamentally a consciousness of unity, and never is the unity lost, even in the full manifestation and expression of the multiplicity. But the overmind moves from multiplicity back towards unity. To continue, it acts in each cosmic formula according to the fundamental it acts in each cosmic formula according to the fundamental meaning of that formula, and is not a power for a dynamic transcendence. Here, in earth life, it has to work upon a cosmic formula whose basis is the entire nescience, which results from the separation of mind, life, and matter from their own source and supreme origin. Overmind can bridge that division up to the point at which separative mind enters into overmind and becomes a part of its action. It can unite individual mind with cosmic mind on its highest plane, equate individual self with cosmic self, and give to the nature an action of universality. But it cannot lead mind beyond itself. And in this world of original inconscience, it cannot dynamize the transcendence, for it is the supermind alone that is the supreme self-determining truth action and the direct power of manifestation of that transcendence. So he said here, cannot lead mind beyond itself, cannot dynamize the transcendence. So the overmind cannot do both. It cannot climb to and descend from the transcendent with the transcendence power. This is the province exclusively of the supramental. So however much we bring overmind down to try to transform the cells of the body and nature generally, it cannot be done. And of course, Sri Aurobindo experienced this in his own sadhana and found what was the range of its potency and what were the boundaries of its potency. If then the action of evolutionary nature ended here, the overmind, having carried the consciousness to the point of a vast illumined universality and an organized play of this wide and potent spiritual awareness of utter existence, force consciousness, and delight, Satchitananda again, could only go farther by an opening of the gates of the spirit into the upper hemisphere and a will to enable the soul to depart out of its cosmic formation into the transcendence. So to rise higher would require the overmind or the overmental consciousness to essentially leave. It would be the great cosmic exit, not cosmic perfection, for overmind to attain that, you see. In the terrestrial evolution itself, the overmind descent would not be able to transform wholly the inconscience. All that it could do would be to transform in each man it touched the whole conscious being, inner and outer, personal and universally impersonal, into its own stuff and impose that upon the ignorance, illumining it into cosmic truth and knowledge. So whether you were a fulfilled person or whether you had grown into the vast cosmic impersonality, it is the areas of your being which are conscious which could be impacted and transformed by the overmental descent. Those areas which are dark, stretching down endlessly into the inconscient, would be untouched. And he continues, but a basis of nescience would remain. It would be as if a sun and its system were to shine out in an original darkness of space and illumine everything as far as its rays could reach, so that all that dwelt in the light would feel as if no darkness were there at all in their experience of existence. But outside that sphere or expanse of experience, the original darkness would still be there, and, since all things are possible in an overmind structure, could re-invade the island of light created within its empire. Overmind being this field of possibilities, not absolute certainties as is so in the supramental. What had not been conquered could reassert itself. The darkness existing below, what is unseen, can rise back up. Moreover, since overmind deals with different possibilities, its natural action would be to develop the separate possibility of one or more or numerous dynamic spiritual formulations to their utmost, or combine or harmonize several possibilities together. But this would be a creation or a number of creations in the original terrestrial creation, each complete in its separate existence. The evolved spiritual individual would be there. There might evolve also a spiritual community or communities in the same world as mental man and the vital being of the animal, but each working out its independent existence in a loose relation within the terrestrial formula. This, of course, would be developed later. In the book, we'll see how he deals with that possibility. The supreme power of the principle of unity, taking all diversities into itself and controlling them as parts of the unity, which must be the law of the new evolutionary consciousness, would not as yet be there. Also, by this much evolution, there could be no security against the downward pull or gravitation of the inconscience, which dissolves all the formations that life and mind build in it, swallows all things that arise out of it or are imposed upon it, and disintegrates them into their original matter. So we're back to the inconscience. So the various victories that we can attain, whether it's standing up this brilliant being at the middle of a spiritual community, beginning to draw others to him so that it becomes a true spiritual community, they have an impact upon global life, but they are not well seated. They are not finally seated. They have no permanent asana. The liberation from this pull of the inconscience and a secured basis for a continuous divine or Gnostic evolution would only be achieved by a descent of the supermind into the terrestrial formula, bringing into it the supreme law and light and dynamis of the spirit, and penetrating with it and transforming the inconscience of the material basis. A last transition from overmind to supermind and a descent of supermind must therefore intervene at this stage of evolutionary nature. And that's where Sri Aurobindo and the mother stood in their partnership in the late 30s, about the time he was writing these last chapters of The Life Divine. Overmind and its delegated powers, taking up and penetrating mind and the life and body dependent upon mind, would subject all to a greatening process. At each step of this process, a greater power and a higher intensity of gnosis, less and less mixed with the loose, diffused, diminishing and diluting stuff of mind, would establish itself. But all gnosis is in its origin power of supermind, so that this would mean a greater and greater influx of a half-veiled and indirect supramental light and power into the nature. This would continue until the point was reached at which overmind would begin itself to be transformed into supermind. The supramental consciousness and force would take up the transformation directly into its own hands, reveal to the terrestrial mind, life, bodily being their own spiritual truth and divinity, and finally pour into the whole nature the perfect knowledge, power, significance of the supramental existence. The soul would pass beyond the borders of the ignorance and cross its original line of departure from the supreme knowledge. It would enter into the integrality of the supramental gnosis. The descent of the Gnostic light would effectuate a complete transformation of the ignorance. So we will have arrived home, and being home-based again, we bring that Gnostic light back into the earth and flood with its unifying force all of life and nature and existence. This, or something more largely planned on these lines, might be regarded as the schematic, logical, or ideal account of the spiritual transformation, a structural map of the ascent to the supramental summit, looked at as a succession of separate steps, each accomplished before the passage to the next commences. It would be as if the soul, putting forth an organized natural individuality, were a traveler mounting the degrees of consciousness cut out in universal nature, each ascent carrying it totally as a definite integer, as a separate body of conscious being, from one state of existence, from one state of its existence to the next in order. This is so far correct that a sufficient integration of one status has to be complete before an ascent to the next higher station can be entirely secure. This clear succession might also be the course followed by a few, even in the early stages of this evolution, and it might become, too, a normal process after the whole stair flight of the evolution has been built and made safe. But evolutionary nature is not a logical series of separate segments. It is a totality of ascending powers of being which interpenetrate and dovetail and exercise in their action on each other a power of mutual modification. So it says easy and does hard. We step from level to level of being. It looks like it's going to be a natural ascent. Oh, we've attained mind, now we'll attain higher mind, now we'll go on to illumined mind, and then to intuition, into overmind, and bring readily down the supramental light and power, and all this golden light will flood the earth. So these are the steps, let's get busy. But the course is not so straight. It is a wandering, winding, meandering course, and it's not logical in its advance. And he explains now why it is so. When the higher descends into the lower consciousness, it alters the lower, but is also modified and diminished by it. When the lower ascends, it is sublimated, but at the same time qualifies the sublimating substance and power. This interaction creates an abundant number of different intermediate and interlocked degrees of the force and consciousness of being, but it also makes it difficult to bring about a complete integration of all the powers under the full control of any one power. For this reason, there is not actually a series of simple, clear-cut, and successive stages in the individual's evolution. There is instead a complexity and a partly determinate, partly confused comprehensiveness of the movement. You can see all of this traced out in particular detail in his own sadhana, because he is himself a laboratory in which these things are being worked out, and his notes in the record of yoga are illustrative of that. Often he thought he would make an advance and have something secured in a short amount of time, and then found that it recoiled upon him. And of course he quit keeping the record of yoga, so far as we know, 1926, 1927. And so the last 24 years of his yogic practice are indiscernible to the probing biographer's gaze. The soul may still be described as a traveler and climber who presses towards his high goal by step on step, each of which he has to build up as an integer but must frequently redescend in order to rebuild and make sure of the supporting stair so that it may not crumble beneath him. But the evolution of the whole consciousness has rather the movement of an ascending ocean of nature. It can be compared to a tide or a mounting flux, the leading fringe of which touches the higher degrees of a cliff or hill, while the rest is still below. At each stage, the higher parts of the nature may be provisionally but incompletely organized in the new consciousness, while the lower are in a state of flux or formation, partly moving in the old way, though influenced and beginning to change, partly belonging to the new kind, but still imperfectly achieved and not yet firm in the change. Another image might be that of an army advancing in columns, which annexes new ground, while the main body is still behind in a territory overrun, but too large to be effectively occupied, so that there has to be a frequent halt and partial return to the traversed areas for consolidation and assurance of the hold on the occupied country and assimilation of its people. A rapid conquest might be possible, but it would be of the nature of an encampment or a domination established in a foreign country. It would not be the assumption, total assimilation, integration needed for the entire supramental change. And of course, Sri Aurobindo is writing this in the early years of the Second World War, so you can find the relevance of using this image here. But his main point was that there has to be a real evolution, a real integration. We have to really do the work. Trying to impose it rapidly from above to sort of steal a mark and effect a magical change, he had no faith in that. He was unconvinced that that would be the necessary evolutionary advance that would secure the supramental manifestation upon the earth. So work it out, if necessary, by degree, but done sincerely and deliberately, one meaningful change after the other until we're finished, until we have the siddhi, the fulfillment. So that's a great place to put our footnote, and so we will for this week. And we'll take it up. We'll take up the final section of the chapter next time. So tonight to close with Savitri, I'm coming back to a section that we read in part roughly about a year ago, but it's so relevant. We turn to it again. This is in Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, in Canto 3, the Yoga of the Soul's Release. Above the reason's brilliant, slender curve, released like radiant air dimming a moon, broad spaces of a vision without line or limit swam into his spirit's ken. Oceans of being met his voyaging soul, calling to infinite discovery. Timeless domains of joy and absolute power stretched out, surrounded by the eternal hush. The ways that lead to endless happiness ran like dream smiles through meditating vasts. Disclosed, stood up in a gold moment's blaze, white sunsteps in the pathless infinite. Along a naked curve and bornless self, the points that run through the closed heart of things shadowed the indeterminable line that carries the everlasting through the years. The magician order of the cosmic mind, coercing the freedom of infinity with the stark array of nature's symbol facts and life's incessant signals of event, transmuted chance recurrences into laws, a chaos of signs into a universe. Out of the rich wonders and the intricate whirls of the spirit's dance with matter as its mask, the balance of the world's design grew clear, its symmetry of self-arranged effects managed in the deep perspectives of the soul, and the realism of its elusive art, its logic of infinite intelligence, its magic of a changing eternity. A glimpse was caught of things forever unknown. The letters stood out of the unmoving word. In the immutable, nameless origin was seen emerging as from fathomless seas the trail of the ideas that made the world, and sown in the black earth of nature's trance, the seed of the spirit's blind and huge desire, from which the tree of cosmos was conceived, and spread its magic arms through a dream of space. Immense realities took on a shape. There looked out from the shadow of the unknown, the bodiless namelessness that saw God born, and tries to gain from the mortal's mind and soul a deathless body and a divine name. The immobile lips, the great surreal wings, the visage masked by superconscient sleep, the eyes with their closed lids that see all things, appeared of the architect who builds in trance. The original desire, born in the void, peered out. He saw the hope that never sleeps, the feet that run behind a fleeting fate, the ineffable meaning of the endless dream. Hardly for a moment glimpsed, viewless to mind, as if a torch held by a power of God, the radiant world of the everlasting truth, glimmered like a faint star bordering the night, above the golden overmind's shimmering ridge.